So good afternoon. My name is Zenovia Harris. I have the pleasure of serving as the Chief Executive Officer for the Kent Chamber of Commerce. We are so excited to have you all here for our membership luncheon. We have a very special guest. This is someone that you all have been asking about for a while, so I hope that whatever you learned today, you're able to take that back to your offices, to your organization, and be able to use that. So now it is my pleasure to bring up our speaker for the day. We have the Director of Commerce, Mr. Joe Nguyen. Joe?
Thank you so much. I'm going to stand here for a little bit. So I'll do a quick talk around what commerce is, what we do, and kind of the state of the economy in Washington State. And then we have plenty of time as well for questions at the very end. So if you have any questions, jot them down. Happy to chat about them afterwards as well. So thank you again, Zenovia and the Kent Valley Chamber, for your leadership and all the work that you're doing, for the invitation to be here today. And thank you, first off, to everybody in the room for being here. And for those who have your businesses, thank you for having your businesses in Washington State, and thank you for having your organizations in Washington State. Truly, it is your work that really drives our economy and really supports our communities as well. I know that it is a tough time out there, so we truly appreciate what you are doing. It is a privilege for me to join so many leaders across South King County, or Kent, just because this area is near and dear to my heart as well. I grew up in South King County in the White Center, Burien area, so I always want to make sure that we come down and say hello to folks. And as context, my name is Joe Nguyen. I am the father of 3 young kids. I'm a lifelong resident of Seattle, and I'm also the proud son of Vietnamese refugees who came to this country with nothing but hope and resilience and a deep belief in the promise of the American dream. And to give you some context, before I ran for office 7 years ago, I actually had no political background. I came from tech, and in fact, I worked at Microsoft for about 10 years. And then fast forward a little bit, 10 months ago, I was actually serving in our state legislature. I was the chair of the Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee, and I was one of the budget writers as well for Washington State. And now I have the distinct honor of leading the Washington State Department of Commerce under Governor Ferguson's administration. And Commerce is one of the most unique agencies in government. We have nearly 800 people. Chris Lovings is in the back. He's raising his hands. He's one of the team members here at Commerce. We have folks that are based across Washington State to engage with communities to figure out how we can better serve our folks across Washington as well. So we have about 800 people at the Department of Commerce across 485 programs, across 5 programmatic divisions. So we touch just about every part of what it means to build thriving communities. Affordable housing is at Commerce, behavioral and mental health is at Commerce, community safety, clean energy, and of course, economic development. Now, I know that there's a lot of nonprofits here as well. You likely, if you have grants through Washington State, it's probably through the Department of Commerce. So we manage over $8 billion in public investments, $8 billion. If the Department of Commerce were a publicly traded company, it would be in the Fortune 500. And what I tell my staff is these programs don't belong to us at Commerce. They belong to you, the people of Washington State. So our job should not be gatekeepers. We should be stewards. And our job is to make sure that every city and every single tribe and every single family has the tools they need to thrive. And I've been telling our team this as well. Government shouldn't just be a place you go when things go wrong. We want every day, every interaction with commerce to be a good one. And I oftentimes joke with my staff as well, is that we really see ourselves as the Oprah of Washington State, right? So you get a grant, right? You get an EV charger. You get affordable housing, right? Those are the things that we get to do here at Commerce. And then, to talk about Washington State for a little bit too, I think in my time in public service, I've certainly seen us do a lot of great things. We've grown global companies that shape industries, including here. When you have advanced aerospace, it's such a big deal for us here. REI is also here as well. We've invested deeply in higher education. We've invested deeply in our communities as well through the Community Reinvestment Fund. And we've also built a workforce that really is the envy of the world. And a lot of them are actually centered here, which is why you're seeing companies like Blue Origin and others placing their businesses here. So we're home to some of the most important economic engines on the planet. Boeing, Microsoft, Amazon, T-Mobile, Packard, Blue Origin, you name it. But what I will say is that we can't necessarily pat ourselves on the back too quickly as well, because one of the things that we're seeing is that our success is not necessarily a given, and it isn't a guarantee that we can continue to thrive, especially in this moment when we're seeing disproportionality when it comes to who has access and who doesn't. So, there are certainly a few things in which we're trying to make up for. And I think one of the major ways that we've been talking about at Commerce is that we're just not building fast enough. We aren't reaching everyone. And too often, we let red tape and bureaucracy and process get in the way of a lot of the outcomes that we actually want. So I tend to read a bit. Ezra Klein has a book out. It talks about how we've gotten so focused on defending process that we've lost sight of the task. I was actually just with an author named Mark Dunkelman just a moment ago. He wrote a book called Why Nothing Works. And he talks about how America today is the victim of a vetoocracy where we basically allow progress to get stifled as well. And that certainly hurts a lot of the communities that we care about. So you see it in things where, I know that PSC is here, right? So we say we want clean energy, but we make it very difficult to build. We say we want more housing. We all need more affordable housing, but the permitting process is very, very tricky. And then we also say that we want our businesses to thrive, but the regulatory process is very difficult to navigate. A lot of the businesses here, I can see you nodding already. So we've built this culture of caution and complexity when what we need now is a culture of urgency, outcomes, and trust. And that's what the Department of Commerce is working to change under Governor Ferguson's leadership. So to give you an example, in the first 9 months of my time as director, we've been on the road quite a bit. So obviously here in Kent, I was in Spokane last night. We were in Bingen and White Salmon the other day, Tri-Cities, Moses Lake, Everett, Bellingham, Colville. I don't know if you guys have been to Colville. It's pretty far away. Beautiful, though. It is beautiful. And then, of course, in Seattle, where I live as well with my family. And we've met with hundreds of organizations and thousands of people. In fact, I've actually committed to the governor that I would visit all 212 chambers of commerces across Washington state. We're about halfway through. I think this might be 112 or so. I can't remember exactly the number. Yeah, thanks. It's a lot of driving. Yeah, it's a lot of driving. Usually drive. I fly very, very rarely. And really, this is not meant to be a box-checking exercise, but it is a way for us to listen and to really listen to every community and every economic development organization and every possibility that has yet to be tapped. In fact, our team put out, for the first time, an external engagement survey. So part of the ways that if you were a business, you want to understand how you can do a better job is you ask your customers. So at Commerce, we did exactly just that. We had a survey that was sent out a few months ago. We hosted 40 in-person and virtual listening sessions. Chris hosted a number of them as well. And we had about 4,000 respondents to give feedback on how we can certainly do a better job. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But what we've seen pretty clearly is that our communities are ready. And as you know, because you're part of the community. And there is certainly talent here that is ready. And we even have capital that is ready. And candidly, what we need to do sometimes is really get out of our own way. So we need to move from focusing on process to partnership. And to give you a better idea in terms of where Washington State's economy is right now as well, we are very strong in many ways, but that picture is certainly complicated. And it's really shifting under our feet, obviously, a lot with what's happening at the federal level. So Washington State is a powerhouse by many, many factors. Our total GDP is about $860 billion, right? Washington is the 10th largest economy in the nation. And that scale really was built on the strength of our global companies, our export-driven industries, and a workforce that I think is an envy of so many other jurisdictions. But I will say that in our latest forecasts, it also reminds us that growth is certainly slowing right now. So job growth is expected to be just 0.3% in 2025. That's about 1% a year through the next decade is the forecast. Aerospace is certainly rebounding with Boeing shipping more planes. Tech and AI continue to drive the economy locally as well. Clean energy manufacturing, especially in central Washington, and agriculture remains strong, but certainly under threat. And one thing that I'll add too is that we have a robust network of small businesses as well that we are very proud of in the workforce that is produced. But what I'll say is that there are certainly headwinds. There are things that make it a little bit challenging. Housing construction is a pretty big indicator. Permits for new housing is falling due to high interest rates, which your businesses are probably impacted by as well. Commercial real estate vacancies remain stubbornly high. And the way that you look at it too is the core revenue streams for the state budget are sales tax, B&O, real estate excise taxes. Those are softening as consumer spending cools. So to take a moment to talk about it a little bit more, I actually think it's good for people to talk about the state budget more to understand kind of how it works and how it gets put together. So just to give you an idea, unlike most states, I think people here know, we do not have a personal income tax. We don't have a corporate income tax either. Instead, we fund our state government through a mixture of consumption and business-based taxes, which can be a bit tricky. The single biggest piece of our budget is the sales and use tax, which makes up almost half of the state general fund. So anytime you buy groceries or clothes or a car, that revenue helps funds our schools, healthcare, and also funds the basic services that we've kind of talked about a little bit before as well. So that's good when the economy is strong, but when the economy weakens and consumer confidence slows down, the revenue for the state also drops, which has impacts on all of us. There's also the B&O tax, so for the small business owners, you probably know what that is. That's about 16% of the state budget. So unlike corporate taxes in other states, this one is not based off of profits, it's based off of gross receipts. So even if you're not in great shape or your profit margin is pretty thin, you still pay a B&O. That is unique to Washington State. And then we also rely pretty heavily on property taxes as well, which is about 10% of the state funds. That one is largely stable, but you can't grow very fast because it is capped by law, which also our property values are going up pretty high, so that becomes untenable for our communities as well. And really, to put it simply, nearly half of the state budget depends on consumer spending. So all of us in this room. So when people pull back on spending and fewer homes are sold, the state feels it. So just to give you an update as well, there was a recent state economic forecast. It's a bit concerning, to say the least. Revenue from when the legislature, Senator Kauffman I see is here, from when the legislature ended to now is down about $400 million. And we expect it to be probably over $1 billion gap over the next 4 years in that outlook. So not to be pessimistic, just wanted to make sure that folks are very aware of the challenges that we're going to face. And all of that is before we factor in some of the risks of the government shutdown that is happening, and then some of the tariffs that can impact some of our export-heavy economies. So from my perspective, if we're able to build more housing or support business growth, these are some of the challenges that we have to overcome to really strengthen our economies. For us to be able to stabilize the very revenue streams that fund our schools and the programs that we've talked about a little bit earlier. And when we think about competitiveness, I think it's also important to recognize also that other states and other jurisdictions are kind of coming after us. It was fascinating for me. If you look at Texas, Florida, Nevada, other states offer very aggressive tax packages and touting lower costs. North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia are trying to very hard come after us with site readiness and advanced manufacturing deals. And then, of course, California as well. And the reason why I bring this up is because that is how rigorous we look at this work, is that we're looking across the nation to see who's coming after us. How do we defend, but also how do we grow? So I think what Washington really brings to the table, and largely here in Kent, is that we really have world-class talent, a dense concentration of global companies along with their supply chain as well, and research and innovation through our universities that is unmatched, that really drive innovation for the future. It's not an accident that we have all these tremendous companies that are here. And we also offer things that other companies in other states cannot have, as well as clean energy. I see that PSC is here. They're doing a lot to work on decarbonizing their energy infrastructure. That's why you see a natural hub for things like advanced manufacturing and data centers and climate-focused investments as well. But what I will say is, in our work at Commerce, we aren't just going to rest on those strengths. We want to make sure that these rival states aren't going to beat us when it comes to speed and certainty. So moving projects from idea to groundbreaking shouldn't take years, they should take months. So as you work on your businesses, we want to make sure that that is much more helpful. They also sometimes will pitch affordability in a way that makes it easier to recruit workers. I think our job is very clear. Washington State may not have the cheapest labor workforce, which I actually think is a good thing because we want to pay our employees. But we certainly should be more predictable and faster as we deliver goods and services. So the takeaway is that Washington State still is very much an economic leader, but we can't take that position for granted. If we want to keep our edge, if we want to build faster, we have to adapt as well, especially when you see disruptions within AI or industries. We have to make sure that we are shaping our future workforce and our markets to reflect the future economies that we're seeing. I've talked about AI a little bit in previous meetings, but certainly there's a disruption there. But we also want to make sure that as folks are shifting, we want to make sure that they have the skills for the future. And kind of an anecdote, most folks don't know, but Washington State is home to 23% of the AI talent in the nation. So 23% of the AI talent in the nation actually is in Washington State, second only to Silicon Valley. So I think the big opportunity in front of us is to reskill or support mid-career employees, expand training in schools and apprenticeships, and making sure that small businesses can use these tools effectively, and not just the big players. We want to make sure that small businesses are actually benefiting from this growth in technology. But the biggest takeaway that I think I have for Washington State really depends on if we choose to retreat from a moment of adversity or use this time to be able to adapt. And I think that's where Commerce comes in. Our role is to make sure that when businesses want to expand, the infrastructure is there, the talent is there, and that they have the predictability that they need to be successful. We can certainly convene, we can unblock, and we can partner, because when global companies decide where to invest or when our communities need support, we want to make sure that we are there to help them. So the choice is very simple, is that if we can either move with urgency or unfortunately get left behind. But I believe that if we want to define and close the energy and economic opportunity gaps of our time, there's really three things that are important to us right now. And largely, that's going to be around making sure that we rebuild trust. Ensuring that, I accidentally moved my phone and it went to the very top, which is weird. Rebuild trust. There's certainly a lack of trust right now in some of our institutions, so we need more transparency, accountability, and also delivering on some of those outcomes. We have to put people over process. So we don't want to necessarily skip safeguards, but we do want to align our process with the purpose. So if it takes 2 years to get your businesses going, that is way too long. It should be much quicker. And we want to build with equity at the center. And that means good paying jobs, rural infrastructure, tribal leadership, and then frontline investments as well as core to those principles, especially as we're seeing attacks from the federal level. And to be clear, I think really what that means oftentimes in the legislature, and Senator Kauffman could probably attest to this too, I'm not saying another work group, I'm not saying another task force, I'm not saying another report. What I think we need to do is really build and support our communities. And we've heard that loud and clear from our partners. So I guess my ask for you in this room before we open it up to questions, and really is, we cannot assume that somebody else is going to fix these issues that we face. I truly believe that the folks and the people in this room right now are the folks that we need. You are the people that this moment requires across various industries, across our communities as well. Because I do think that we have to build public trust, but it depends on people like you in this room. And I do think that we have the ability to show the country what it looks like to lead with our values and with vision and with urgency. And it's only done in partnerships with our communities, which is why we've spent so much time traveling across Washington State. I will say it's been interesting in that trip that we've been taking. Usually whenever I meet with a group, especially when it's in a more rural or frontier area like Colville, they actually don't, they'll first say like, who are you? Like what is the director of commerce? What do you do? Right? So like the fact that there are people in our communities who don't even know the role of how we could potentially help, I think it's an opportunity for us to be able to engage. Because I think if we do this right, Washington will be able to not just meet this moment, we can also define it like we've always done in the past. So again, thank you so much for all that you do for our communities. Thank you for your time today. I'm going to answer questions for a bit, so if you have some of that. I'm also a former politician, so I can speak all day if you guys want as well. And there's certainly updates that we have around, I know for instance, nonprofits, how do we make contracting better and things more accessible as well. But I'll go ahead and pause and go ahead and open up questions. So I'll start with you. Thank you.
In the rural areas, how do you support the farmers that are going through
Yeah, farmers are, it's always interesting. Whenever you go to rural areas, the first thing they'll say is that the people in Puget Sound don't listen to them or talk to them. And it's always interesting because I'm physically there talking to them, right? So, but it's one of those things where, there's a number of things that we're doing in that space regarding helping with imports and exports, trying to mitigate some of the impacts that they're having. One of the things that we're dealing with last week is that pears were impacted by tariffs, and a cannery was actually closed down in Yakima, and we're trying to help mitigate some of those impacts. But candidly, 2016, agriculture was one of our top industries in Washington. It's down about 30% since then because of what we're seeing at the federal level. And a lot of that has been us going around to different jurisdictions trying to expand their markets. So that is certainly one. And then other ways we're trying to help around like managing water and energy to ensure that they have those resources as well. But farmers, the agricultural work that is being done, I think is one of the most critical components. You're seeing kind of this transition to big pharma, big farms, which is not necessarily going to be good for our food and our supply chain. So really paying attention to what that looks like. Yeah, thank you.
Joe, again, my name is also Joe from Mentor Washington, a nonprofit serving statewide. I really appreciate you bringing up the tax structure. And I didn't realize that nearly half of our tax is based on consumer spending.
Yeah.
So recognizing that that's a root of one of the issues, that we do have one of the most regressive tax systems in the country, which impacts equity in a big way.
Yeah.
And your formal role as a lawmaker, I think, gives you a unique perspective. What role can commerce play or not play in driving constitutional change to allow taxes based on income? Like, yeah. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how commerce might play a role in that.
I think the biggest thing for us first is to do a good job, right? Like people need to have trust in our institutions and trust that the funding and the resources are being spent well and being done in a way that is strategic and mindful of the values of our people as well. A lot of times government gets kind of flack for not being as efficient as they can be. I will say government workers are very efficient with very little resources, but we have to make sure that we change some of that paradigm. We do work with our businesses as well. Well, how do you ensure that this is being done thoughtfully and equitably? There's a push right now around tax reform, which candidly doesn't actually mean that you pay more taxes. It's more leveling out. Fundamentally, as a budget writer, my perspective on taxes was the lowest rates possible with the widest base, because that lowers the risk and also doesn't put an undue burden on any particular community as well. Right now, our tax structure is the exact opposite. So if you're wealthy, you pay a very small percent. If you're not wealthy, you pay a very high percent. So there's certainly opportunities for us to engage there. And really, again, I'm no longer a legislator, but having been in those budget rooms, I really do think that part of what we can do in government is to ensure that people have trust in their institutions and value what is being done, because it is really easy to undermine some of these policies when they point out like waste or fraud, right? Which none of us want, but we also want to make sure that we're being strategic about how we invest as well. So we are engaged in some of those conversations right now. I think there will be some more as well. And part of it is because we have to. It's a necessity at this point. The next budget cycle, we haven't been warned by the governor or anything like that, but I can read. And, and I can see that things are not going well right now. Let's go with you, and then we'll go with you back there. Oh, that's fine. Here.
Hi, Carmen Goris, Washington Trust. Our bridges have been under attack down here in South King County lately. Bridges, people have hit bridges have hit people, but it's causing, bridges, I'm trying to be nice. But because of that, businesses are taking a suffering as people have to go around or their commute's added by 45 minutes to an hour. Is there some way that the Department of Commerce is helping? We're talking about the Sumner Valley, the Kent Valley, the Puyallup Valley. There's several bridges that have been delayed or are offline right now.
You know, it's funny. You're like the third community to have this conversation with us actually pretty recently. We've seen that in the Olympic Peninsula and another community as well.
It's an attack on the bridge.
It is attack. I mean, the bridges, well, first off, the bridges are aging infrastructure. We need to actually invest in our infrastructure. That's one of the main problems. Send me a note afterwards. I was actually just talking with the director of the Department of Revenue around ways that we can use tax abatements and whatnot to help alleviate some of the burdens for communities that are impacted literally by bridges falling down. The governor was actually out helping kind of spearhead some of these conversations in other jurisdictions where their bridge went down as well. So he happens to care really like a lot about bridges being undermined or attacked, I guess. So send me a note and let's figure out what that looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, so we are thankful to receive grants from Commerce, and so very familiar with the process and all of that. But just wanting to hear a little bit about what you're doing in regards to supporting equal salaries and pay and for talent who are working in nonprofits. Oftentimes, to work in a nonprofit, we are taking a big pay cut from what you could be making in the for-profit industry, and our grants and contracts dictate the ability to give raises based on how much is there year over year. So is there anything that Commerce is doing to look at that to help increase salaries so that we can retain talent and keep the folks working within our communities?
Yeah, so the question I think folks heard is around how do we ensure that our nonprofits who are serving our communities really have the resources to be successful. And what's interesting is 3 years ago, when I was in the legislature, I tried to sneak a budget proviso in, along with Senator Kauffman actually, to really examine why our nonprofits were not being compensated appropriately. So for those who don't know, if you're a nonprofit, you're basically capped by how much you can spend on operating overhead within Washington State. This is kind of the source of the problem that you're describing right now. And the double whammy in that process too is when you apply for a grant in Washington State, and if you get it, if you're lucky enough to get it, you have to comply with the legal obligations associated with it. So the State Administrative and Accounting Manual, which governs these contracts, along with the DES contract manual, along with, if it's federal dollars, the federal manual, you're talking 1,400 pages, up to 1,500 pages of compliance obligations. That is just to comply. That's longer than Game of Thrones. Like that's like reading, Lord of the Rings. Right? That's like Harry Potter level of pages in terms of what you have to comply with.
Less excitement.
And it's much less interesting. It is much less interesting. So even if you're able to get a grant for, say, for instance, $100,000, you're probably going to spend $30,000 just going after that grant, and then you can't cover that cost, and then you're actually not even covering the full burden of that as well. So we're doing a few things in that space where that is actually a personal passion of mine as somebody who kind of came up working with social service providers and seeing firsthand what happened. So I actually grew up in White Center in a refugee community, so we relied on food banks. I lived in public housing. We relied on social services to provide, so it happens to be a thing that I care about. So there's a couple of things we're going to do that I think more near term and long term. First, there's an organization called the Campaign for 20. They want to raise what the reimbursable costs could be for the state. I think that would be a trickier lift. But there are some things that we can do to make that process more easy and manageable. There's things like advance payments. So even if you're a nonprofit, people are nodding because it's terrible. Say, for instance, you get a grant for $500,000. You basically have to spend that money first in order to be reimbursed. And that reimbursement process can take months and months. Commerce is actually on the faster end, which I think needs to be faster, but that becomes very tricky. So we want to make sure that, first off, the discoverability of these opportunities are more viable. We heard that pretty loud and clear. We set up a website, not perfect, but a first draft, commerce.wa.gov/contracting. So you can just see what's out there. You filter on kind of what services you provide, it'll pop up. There's another one for energy called fundhub.wa.gov for energy stuff all across. We're working with policymakers around potential solutions to advance payments. That's going to require statute change. We're also doing what we call performance-based contracts, where instead of having you wait to get paid, part of the contract provides resources upfront if you have, say, for instance, a plan and some certain deliverables. So making that process easier. I think raising the actual amount that you're able to reimburse is candidly going to require legislative change. So there's some advocacy being done in that space that will let me get you kind of more engaged. But that's kind of the secret in Washington State that I think is really ugly, where we are basically asking nonprofits and community-based organizations to subsidize the work that the state should be doing. And 3 years ago, when I brought this up, I actually got shunned. In fact, it was shunned by Commerce, which is funny. So now that I'm here at Commerce, we want to make sure that we change that. So I'd love to have you join in some of those efforts as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming out here to Kent and to, we have such a diverse group of small businesses, manufacturing, warehousing, aerospace, great restaurants, great credit unions, financial institutions. I think, of course, my district is the best, right?
Yes.
And so I want to say thank you for coming out here and for sharing your knowledge and your input and the great work that you're doing at Department of Commerce. And I would love to have you come out and share some more in terms of not only small businesses, but in terms of our aerospace industry that we have, going down the street. We have so many aerospace manufacturers all through the valley, from Tukwila down to Auburn, which is growing, at such fast speed. And how can we support, or how can I work with you to support our aerospace manufacturing?
Yeah, and then for those who don't know, Senator Kauffman also leads a lot of our conversations around economic development and business relations as well in the Senate. So a tremendous amount of work that she does. And what's interesting is a lot of times people understand that Boeing exists, and they think that Boeing is just this giant entity. What they don't know is that there's actually 1,500 suppliers that supply Boeing. Maybe you probably have friends or family in that space, but Boeing isn't the one that's supplying all the jobs. It's the suppliers that are supplying all the jobs. And one of our strategic goals that we have is to ensure that that is an ecosystem that remains robust. I was actually at the Paris Air Show a few months ago, where we led with the largest delegation in Washington State's history. There was about 80 individuals there, 24 companies that were there as well, and CEOs. And I made sure to talk to every single one. And what I thought was fascinating, this is kind of how it dovetails to the question about how do we support them. About a third of the CEOs that were there brought their, and generally speaking, it was their son or their daughter, around transition planning. They were going to have them take over the business. There were 2/3 of them where, no offense, they were maybe a little bit older than me. And I was like, are you transition planning? Because we still need to make sure that your business is viable as well. So ensuring that we have a way for us to, first off, have workforce to support these industries. The other one is working with them to ensure that there's resources for a transition plan, I think a lot of times in that case as well. And then the other is we want to make sure that they open up other opportunities. So obviously we care and we support Boeing. Those parts, those machining, those precision coils that are made look very nice on satellites for Blue Origin, look very nice on clean energy companies as well, looks very good on other industries. So our goal is to make sure that we have a strong ecosystem of suppliers, because they directly feed into other companies that potentially are here. And manufacturing inherently looks a lot different now than it does 50 years ago. So one of the things that we've done is we fund, say for instance, shop classes. We have what's called the Green Manufacturing Grant, where we actually in Spokane funded the upgrades to a shop class. I went to a shop class when I was in middle school, high school. I think the shop class looks probably the same, but that is very different than what kids need now. So we were able to get them CNCs, we were able to get them laser printers, we were able to get them 3D printers and welding devices that are more modern as well. So by giving resources in ways that are strategic, we can empower our young people, have a workforce that I think is set, and then also work with those owners to ensure that we're making sure that opportunities are available to them. So that's actually a really big thing that I try to think about, is that I don't want folks to just think that Washington State is Microsoft, Amazon, Boeing, or Starbucks. It's actually the small businesses and largely communities of color who own those businesses, or immigrants that own those businesses, that drive our economy.
Perfect. I'm just looking at my email, Director, no respect to you or disrespect to you, but I just have something that came into my email about one of our manufacturers. So thank you so much, Senator, for bringing that up. In regards to tariffs, and she's asked me, who do you direct this to, right?
Yeah.
They've got 2 machines this is a small manufacturer here in the Valley. They have 3 machines that are being manufactured, and the loans are ready, the machines are ready. the loan is going to be produced in one day and able to sign the paperwork, but now there is a 39% tariff, so it equals $520,000. So that's going to prohibit her from being able to get those 3 machines. Who would you direct, well, other than the president, child, but who would you direct?
I don't have control over that.
Her locally, because I know that, right? But who locally would you think she can have that conversation with? Because I think a lot of our manufacturers, and because we are, the manufacturing hub for Washington State, we're going to see a lot of that. So where's that conversation? Where can we start that conversation? What would be your suggestion? Same thing to you, Senator. Where would we start that conversation?
Yeah, Commerce handles a lot of that. And what I'll just say is that we're never going to have enough resources to mitigate the full impacts of the tariffs. And they change every single day. Like it is, the one thing is, there's business owners in here. Really, the most important thing that you want is clarity and predictability. We have neither at this point. And you have tariffs going from 0% to 150%, which is wild. So there's a couple of resources that we've actually been able to help some of those manufacturers. We have a grant program, a loan program at Commerce where it is unique. It's based off a partnership that we have with industry. So oftentimes when you get a loan for your business, you have a rate and you pay a certain amount every single month. So we have a flexible loan where essentially you get your amount, and depending on your revenue, how much you're actually able to make, you pay that percentage. So if you don't make very much, you don't pay anything. If you make a lot, then you pay some more over the lifetime of that loan, and largely that's for smaller, medium-sized businesses. That's one. And then we do have a website on Choose Washington is one of our sites that kind of gives you the latest updates on what's happening with tariffs. Even I have to check on a daily basis. I was actually telling somebody earlier today, I'm named in, I think, 6 lawsuits right now. So the tariff situation is actually one. And right now, the tariffs are being brought before the Supreme Court, which historically you can kind of count on, but now I'm not quite sure. That they're, to me, clearly unconstitutional. And if in October it is ruled unconstitutional, they all go away. But again, we don't know. So basically, you got to hold on for about a month until you figure out what's going to happen. But we're happy to kind of give you the latest updates, try to connect other resources that might be able to bridge you until you get there. But it's kind of a tough situation to be in. Senator Kauffman, I don't know if you have anything, or basically yours like Senator Joe.
Yeah, that's the same. That's the unpredictable things that are happening along with the government shutdown. And so, how soon and how fast we'll be able to address.
Specifically the name of that loan, Director?
I think it's a flexible fund. So it's within our Office of Economic Development. I think the tranche is still open. There's like $5.4 million that's available. I know that we've allocated some, but it's a brand new program. Yeah. Wonderful.
I also heard, Andrew, I see you. Another thing that, kind of comes across my desk when we're talking about the loans, and this could be city, county, whatever. But something. Okay. So something that typically happens is and this happens in the nonprofit world from where I get it, is that the same nonprofits are getting funding. Yeah. And that the new nonprofits, or maybe the folks who haven't been able to access those funds, are kind of shut out of that. And so is there a way, or is there a conversation at Commerce as it relates to, hey, business, you've received this funding for the last 10 years, and there's someone that has been grassroots for the last 5 years. Is there any way we can think about equitably ensuring that all nonprofits are able to access the funding and not just the typical people who are getting the funding?
It's actually even worse than you described. So what usually happens is those folks that are grassroots, they don't get access to the grants. The larger either nonprofits or organizations get them and then contract them out right to the local ones where they should have done it in the first place. What's interesting is that at Commerce, we're doing this data monetization exercise to kind of prove that out. We want to make sure that that's not quite happening. And there's a couple other things too. And part of it is, I have this saying where mediocrity and maliciousness look very similar. So you can't actually tell if that's on purpose or that's just because people don't know what they're doing. And the reason why that's kind of happening is because that process to get access to a grant is so terrible that really you have to have a large organization with a legal department, with a lobbyist, with an auditor, with a reporting person to be able to actually make it all work. That's why it's actually so difficult to do. So one of the initiatives that we're actually building right now at Commerce, we're going to try to pilot actually the PAC Med Tower, hopefully in the next few months, is we want to have innovation centers. So if you are a small nonprofit or a new nonprofit and you've never worked with the state, it doesn't matter if it's Commerce or not, you never worked with the state, we will help you figure out what that process looks like. We will help walk you through this process. We are going to have resources to ensure that you know how to be compliant. Because it is, I will say, it is a terrible experience. So let me give you an example. If you are a nonprofit with a state contract and you're allowed to travel, so you spend $200 on a hotel in Seattle because there's a conference, great. You spend $200 on a hotel in Spokane, you just violated the law because that is above per diem. It is that pedantic in terms of how tough you work with the state. So our job is to make it much more achievable, and that's by having these innovation centers where we want to make sure that we get folks in, ensure that they see and access the resources that are available. That's why we have folks like Chris in our communities are kind of expanding access to that as well. Then we have a metric for ourselves where we want to see how many new organizations that we can actually partner with. So that's one. And the other thing too is that, say for instance, you have had contracts with Commerce for a little bit. One of the most frustrating things that I've seen at Commerce is if you apply for a grant, say for instance in our community services group, that's a process. And then if you apply for, say for instance, weatherization and energy, it's a different process. And if you apply for a small business grant, different process. None of that data is actually kept. So you're redoing your work. So even the work that you're already doing is wasted. So we're going to have a much more streamlined process where as you fill things out, we'll make sure that we keep your data, we fill it in, and you only have to do the small part. Eventually, I actually want to get to a point too, because I've worked with a lot of nonprofits, and one of the things that I keep hearing is the reporting process is very tough. So they end up having to buy, Salesforce for $20,000. We want to be able to offload some of that work. So as you submit reimbursements, it should be very similar to Expensify, where it gets checked, you get paid right back, and that goes right towards your reporting requirements. We'll have the infrastructure built out. This is going to take time. This is not going to happen overnight. These are things that I think we should be doing. And what I'll say is that, the hard part is that you have to balance accountability with ease. And I think that's how you do it. You ensure that communities are prepared and ready to go, and you give them the tools. Because right now, we don't. And then when some of them stumble, which they will do, we blame community, which is absolutely the wrong thing to do. We need to make sure that we're actually showing up in a way that actually is in service to them. So that's how I go about doing that.
So just to follow up also, you talked a little bit about how there's bridge funding and these loans for businesses that are experiencing some of these challenges with tariffs. I'm wanting to understand for those of us who
Nonprofits, yeah, there's not much.
Who may have lost 2 federal grants in the same week that's close to $500,000 a year that we've had for 14 years.
Yeah.
And we're targeted because of civil rights, even though we serve BIPOC community. Is Commerce looking at like rapid response funding or anything to be able to help those of us? Because when we look at how that impacts our ability to perform the services, but also to employ staff, I mean, we're looking at potentially losing 6 people overnight because of that. So just wanting to know if you guys have looked at any of that and what that might look like.
Yeah, no, I mean, what's happening at the federal level is terrible, and it's happening at a scale that is certainly unmanageable as well. We can try to see if there's other funding sources that you may be eligible for. I don't know of a grant specifically for nonprofits that can do bridge loans to that capacity. What we've done in the past, and again, we'd have to stand this up, but this is the generosity of the group organizations that we have. We have a number of community foundations that have stepped up in this space, so we can try to potentially partner you with some of those folks. We have talked to some of them about how we can help mitigate and kind of smooth this over. The state itself last year had to deal with a $16 billion budget deficit, so we were just hoping to plug as many holes as possible, let alone not having new pots. But that's probably one of the ways that we might try to engage is, if you want, let's talk to some of our community-based organizations and community foundations that are nearby. I think that's probably one of the ways that we can probably help a lot, just kind of getting them through. But again, it's just one of those things where, the sad reality is that elections have consequences, and even though they don't, align to our values, that's what has happened, and now we're trying to deal with the consequences of it. So thank you for all that, and we'll try to figure it out. Thank you for what you're doing. Yeah.
You mentioned that 20% of AI talent is here. How much AI talent are you using at the Department of Commerce to help us?
Yeah, so what's funny is I get in trouble all the time about this because the state is very scared of technology. I come from tech, so I remember when I first came into the legislature 7 years ago, you only get one staff member, as Senator Kauffman knows. So they spend 80% of their time scheduling functionally, getting you to the right clock. And I was like, this is crazy because my staff member has a master's degree. I'm just gonna use an app. So I'm gonna use an app called Calendly to schedule all my meetings. They can pick a time.
We
Yeah,
all
folks.
do that.
Yeah, you use it to cut your hair. I got in trouble. Say HR was like, you can't do that. And I was like, I don't think you know how to stop me, so I'm just gonna keep doing it because it's the browser. And then if you Google I get in trouble a lot, so it's fine. But, so I am not. I have high achievers in my family, and I'm not one. So you have to compensate. Doctor, engineer. Actually, it was at Valley Medical for a bit as well. Physician at Valley Medical. So what we're doing at Commerce is we're piloting a lot of things. I think part of it is that oftentimes in government, people are too scared to use new technology, and for good reason. There are certainly things that we want to make sure that we're protecting against our data, bias, things like that. So we're piloting a number of things. I think we're the only agency using Copilot. And Copilot, if you don't know, Microsoft product, it's basically ChatGPT, but it's Microsoft's, and it locks in that data. It does not go out to train anybody else's models. We're also using it in a variety of different ways too, where say, for instance, we scrub for other funding opportunities, not just in Washington State. So we have a tool that goes out and finds other opportunities, brings it back, and actually uses AI to be able to translate that NOFO and make it consistent. So, just makes it so that you can catch things easier as well. I know our team uses Copilot in the pilot program to help me. So a lot of times when I go meet with folks, there's like 50 people that I'm meeting with, and it's hard to understand who everybody is. They've actually been using that to help kind of organize as well. So I'll say we're doing a lot in terms of testing what that might look like. I think that there's a huge opportunity for us. There's 15 things that I've written down that I think would be good. Making the application process better is one. Streamlining our permitting is another. What we've also heard too is that, and you could probably do this on your own if you want to, but the state, for those who have state contracts, that state administrative and accounting manual is so tough to get through. I've seen folks upload that, not at Commerce, I've seen folks upload that, and then people would ask it questions. Can I do this? Can I do that? How do I do this? So there's ways to actually make it easier so you don't actually, see, I'm just giving people ideas on how you can use technology to make your life easier.
Never gets in trouble.
Yeah, but I do get in trouble, but I never get in trouble for very long because I'm usually right. There you go. So we are looking at a number of things to make that much more effective as well. And candidly, we were very lucky to have, Microsoft and Amazon in our backyards that are willing to make that work. We're also looking at potentially using AI. So for those who don't know, the reason why it's so hard to navigate state resources like our websites is because they're built so long ago on technology that doesn't really exist anymore called COBOL. So we're seeing we can use AI to update that technology so that way the same experiences you get when you shop online you can get at the Department of Commerce. So the answer is TBD. A lot of that stuff we work with our labor partners. So I respect labor and I respect collective bargaining, and I want to make sure that we do it right. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Joe. I wanted to ask about we were a recipient of the community reinvestment, one of the programs, the financial coaching. And from my experience in that process, it was really focused on buying for organizations. The reporting process was challenging, but understandable. We were able to get through it.
Yeah.
And so and the selection process, I think, was done in a very equitable way. Is that happening for other programs? I know there's hundreds within Commerce, but is that happening for other contracting programs under Commerce, or was that just a community reinvestment plan?
No, that's consistent with all of them. They may have varying regions of how tough they may be. So for those who don't know, the community investment program was initially supposed to be one-time funding, $20 million, to really address some of the historical harms that we've had in our communities, especially for BIPOC organizations, those impacted by the war on drugs. And the legislature actually has continued to fund that at about $50 million per biennium, so it's great. The hard part is that going from 200 to 50 is tough, but the fact that it's ongoing is a very positive thing. And what you're describing in that process is kind of how we want to be able to engage. I will say, oftentimes when you do things equitably, it's not always the most efficient, and also not the easiest to do as well. So we are trying to have some learnings from that process, where one of it is, how do we ensure that the community's voice is more seen and heard in a way that you can scale but also have confidence in? So having kind of not a committee, but say, for instance, credible messengers in that space. The reporting process, is rigorous. I think that's just the nature of state contracts, and we are trying to address that specifically as well. But what you're experiencing with CRP is, generally speaking, what you would experience across other entities. And what I find, I've always thought that commerce was very difficult to work with, just as a legislator, because I saw so many rules. I don't like rules. We're actually one of the easiest. So I'm like, oh my goodness. So we're trying to actually do things in a more innovative way, so that way other agencies can feel like they can actually take some more risk. Yeah.
I was wondering, are there some niches of money that have been set aside that have not been accessed by different companies? Like something was set out for a company and nobody's tried to get a grant for it or anything.
Yeah, so you're describing what's called reversions. So a lot of times, this is very normal in the legislature, you allocate money for something and it doesn't fully get spent or it takes too long to get spent, so that's called a reversion. And here's the pro tip, I think nonprofits probably know this. July is the fiscal year end for Washington State. There's always a mad scramble at the fiscal year end to either get your resources allocated in time and out, and sometimes there are people who say we can't spend it, and we'll try to allocate it to other places as well. So just know that we have now a process of commerce where 6 months before that deadline, we try to work with folks to see if there's additional resources that might be able to get out, because if you don't make it by that July time period, the budget resets. So it kind of goes away, you gotta figure it back out. But yeah, that happens a lot. It happens a lot in capital projects. You'd be surprised at the number of folks who say, we have this great project, community loves it, we have buy-in. Yes, Senator Kauffman's laughing because she knows. Everything is perfect, and then 2 years later, they haven't broke ground. And you're like, oh, it wasn't as ready as people say. So this happens a lot. We try to be rigorous around that process, but also it's kind of the messy form of government where, when you're trying to be engaged across large jurisdictions and demographics, you'll have some messiness, but it is our job to try to triangulate what that looks like. Good question, thank you. Well, thank you so much. I don't see any more, but I really appreciate the time and attention, and hopefully that was somewhat helpful. But again, thank you for all that you're doing. I know that is a very tough time for our communities right now, and you really are the front lines of some of that work. And I truly appreciate it, on behalf of Commerce and our team, but also for the governor as well. So thank you so much.